Hello. How are you today?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. Are you feeling that Dirty Dancing vibe?
No, I've never seen that movie.
Seriously. All right. Well, we know you need to be here if we have the screening tomorrow, right? Everyone, what are we telling her to be here tomorrow? If we, I mean, that's the first thing I thought of driving, going up there. So, I guess you didn't have that same
I didn't
thought.
have that same thought.
Well, we won't put baby in the corner, okay? All right, well, so as Erin introduced, I mean, you guys have so many brands and are obviously very well known. It's not necessarily about brand awareness. But there is so much that you need to do in terms of when you have so many brands and so many marketing teams, and to know what you have to push forward. Like, what should you be doing? What could you be doing? How are you really making things work within such a integrated organization? So talk about that a little bit.
So yes, there's a lot of things that we could do. To figure out what we should do, we really do think about like the end in mind. What is the strategy we're trying to deliver against? What is the outcomes we want to see? And then we're using data and working backwards, right? So using the data to give us a real outside-in view of the situation, helping us understand what's going on, what the trends are. And then we're making the decision based on what's going to drive the biggest impact for the business.
Well, I mean, and then in terms of, obviously, we're hearing the next best thing and trying to figure that out and to determine that. And it's evolving over the years, and especially with now what we're seeing with digital marketing and what capabilities there are out there. But how are you determining that? How are you sort of using that predictive modeling and then figuring out, okay, this is the next best thing?
Yeah, so yeah, next best action is all over the place. I think everyone's probably leveraging that now. At a macro level, as we said, like HCPs are consumers too, and just like us as consumers want a personalized experience. So our goal is to try to understand what they want, what they need, try to make sure that we're giving them the information that they need at the right time. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, we want to make sure that doctors have the data about our products so that they feel comfortable recommending. Those recommendations hopefully lead consumers, when they talk to consumers, lead them to go and pick up our products at the shelf.
But well, this is so much data. Like, really, how are you connecting all the data points that you're using to make sure that path is more, if not seamless, it's easier to follow, and basically then you're getting much more engagement from that?
So the magic is in the model, right? And so at a macro level, when you think about those MBA AI models, it is connecting all of the touch points that a doctor would have. So, if we're having face-to-face conversations with our reps, are they receiving CRM? Are they receiving, getting served media? And all of those data points come together on the back end. You can connect them using the doctor's NPI numbers to see, are they engaging? And you can start to see what are the topics that they're most interested in. And then you can serve that back to them so that you know that you're giving them something that they're interested in. So it's that personalized experience. I saw you looking about retinols. Doctor, when I show up in your office next time, I'm going to talk to you about retinols because that's what you're interested in.
Right. Are you able to adjust quickly? I mean, how quick when you're doing this? Because that's obviously, and especially with pharmaceutical, obviously over the counter, maybe a little different, but it's not always easy.
The model definitely has to learn over time, but the more data that's put in, the faster you're able to have the model learn and then, adjust as needed.
Well, and then, I mean, we sort of made mention early on, a lot of brands you guys are doing, very big company, a lot of chefs in the kitchen, so let's say. How are you getting those best practices to them, and how are you sharing that and making sure it's across the board?
Yeah, I mean, my team is actually all about trying to make sure we take what works well and scale it. And so, I'm sure just like other companies, we do test and learns, we figure out what works well, and then we scale it as much as possible. And of course, you have to connect with others because there's lots of people doing lots of different things in such a big organization. But the goal is to learn, scale, and keep going, right? Drive for the business.
Do you feel like I mean, I think that's a lot of complaints I'll hear from many marketers that I speak with, that it's very much in a silo sometimes, and and then you're duplicating things, and that's obviously not efficient, and that's a waste. Are you able to sort of get past all that?
Yeah, my team actually supports all of our HCP focused teams. So, pediatrics, GPs, derm, oral health, like all of them. And so we're learning across lots of different HCP groups and taking the best from wherever it comes from and then scaling it where applicable.
Wow, that's great. Well, and how much is technology now coming into play in terms of helping, obviously, your teams even be more successful?
Yes, I mean, so one part of my team is all about building, digital capabilities that can be leveraged across the board. So technology is right there.
And I mean, not everyone always is welcoming to technology. So in terms of, again, getting into people to embrace it, was this a process within your organization to bring that on board? And if so, how did you able to handle that?
At a macro level, I don't think it's been hard to get people to think about technology as a core capability that has to be brought in. If you think about, I think our biggest challenge was just making sure that the sales force was online with it. Initially, folks really thought that this was going to take their jobs away, and helping them understand that this is actually a tool for them. It helps to make them more efficient, and the model can't work without them. They play a core part of it. So making sure that they understood the why behind why we are bringing in MBA, AI models, why, what the overarching impact can be for the business, and then helping them see the impact of when they use those tools, what is the impact on doctor recommendations. Now they get it.
Yeah, and it sounds like it just really needs to be an open discussion across, not just within your section.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and as we said, OTC products, you need to worry about the sales in the store. But you also have the healthcare workers who you want them to recommend the product. So that's sort of, how do you do that? Is it differently in terms of the way you focus there and what you're doing for sales within the retail organization?
So, I mean, our biggest metric as an HCP team is around doctor recommendations. And so we measure that across the board. In the retail setting or digital, we might use HCP recommendations in those spaces to help consumers make choice at shelf. But recommendations is only part of what we're trying to do at a macro level. What we want doctors to feel comfortable recommending, that means sharing our science. At Kenvue, we earn trust with science, and so making sure that they understand the clinical data behind our products, they understand the ingredients, and they feel comfortable recommending it. And then when they do, then those recommendations translate into #1 claims. And as Kenvue, we have over 10 #1 claims in on the either straight from doctors or even on pharmacy sides, we have #1 claims. So we have a lot of products that are #1 in their category. And then when consumers show up at shelves, they can help them make a final choice sometimes.
Well, and also, I mean, I know for my doctor recommended Zyrtec.
And I love it.
Yes. So, and, but he has to inform me how to, it's not one of those where you take it and it's going to clear, we won't say another brand.
Yes.
But it's more you have to continue with it. But it's that kind of information, but you need to say it in a way non-scientifically to someone. I'm saying, so do you teach that? Do you train that to communicate better, like how consumers or how patients need to be spoken to?
Yeah, I think that is an interesting balance, because doctors want to know the science, but then it's also helpful to give them the words sometimes to help them explain your science to a patient when they're in the chair. And then you also think about the resources that you provide as well to their office, to their staff, so that patients can leave the office with a sample, with maybe some literature about the product.
Yeah, because it's definitely, you speak differently to a doctor than you would a regular consumer who maybe doesn't want to hear the scientific side of it, and they want to just know, all right, is it going to make me so I don't start coughing and sneezing, or whatever it may be. What about AI? How much does that fit into what you're doing and how you've evolved in terms of really reaching your audiences?
Well, the MBA, Next Best Action model, is AI based. So we have built, we're building our own model internally. And I'm sure most companies are at this point. AI is everywhere.
So, and you talked about internally, and then obviously externally, there's factors there. How much are you embracing it? Just because when you think of AI, it can be considered sort of a scary word sometimes, especially within an industry where there's so many regulations, there's so many privacy issues, and there are concerns with AI. Now, I think everyone's moved past being, no, and then everyone, okay, we need to do some, but how much can you invest in AI or rely on AI, given you're also working with doctors and obviously then patients?
Yeah, I think at a macro level, everyone is still feeling out the AI world. But we do use AI in small ways, even to help us with content optimization sometimes. So there's ways for AIs to help.
Well, yes, and certainly more efficient. I'm sure you're finding that as
Yes.
well. So getting rid of those mundane little jobs that maybe not everyone wants to be doing.
Yeah.
What about social media? I mean, we can't not talk about social media. It's no longer just an extra add-on. It is part of the media mix. But at the same point, again, when you're talking to HCPs, where are they going? How are you reaching them? Do you reach them on social the same way you would a consumer? Or
Yes.
the way most marketers would say reach a consumer?
Yes. So at a macro level, we know HCPs use social media because they are consumers too, right? They over-index on Meta. They use TikTok. They use Twitter or X, right? So we know that they're in social spaces. We do message to them in social spaces, and they're through 3P data, like we can make sure that we're tracking HCPs. And ultimately, we still are serving them our science message. We're just doing it when they're sitting at home and they're, on the sofa scrolling, but they're still receiving the message. And hopefully you hope that like when you give it to them, when they're not in the office busy dealing with patients, they might be more receptive and a little more open to hearing what you're saying. But you're still gonna follow like best practices for social media. So it's still short form content, human imagery, text overlay, so that they don't have to have sound on. So you're still following the typical social media best practices, but you're just kind of giving a science message to that doctor.
I'm curious, does it change depending on specialty? In terms of where you said they're over-indexing on Meta. Does that change at all, or any of the other channels?
So platform does change, just like on the consumer side, they tell you to make sure you're making content to the channel, right? So that still applies. But at a macro level, those core approaches are true, whether you're talking to a dermatologist or a pediatrician.
So in terms of you getting, not just with social, but social sort of brings to mind you need to have a different personality. And depending on each channel, as you mentioned, each platform has a certain personality. What about the messaging overall? We're seeing much more friendlier, or, in terms of the consumer marketing, maybe funnier kinds of ads. Does that kind of take place in terms of when you're talking with the HCPs, or how did your messaging evolve?
Yeah, we haven't necessarily gotten to funny yet, but I mean, we're still just putting our science forward. We want to make sure that it's easy to digest, easy to understand. We know that we don't have a lot of their time. So we treat doctors as doctors. They are professionals, they went to medical school, we're serving up the science in a way that we hope that they can quickly digest and recall it when they're in offices talking to their patients. So we don't get funny yet with doctors.
Well, it's almost, and not to call you a geek, but it's geek talking to geek.
Yeah.
When you're talking to someone technical, and they, if you stay so higher level, but perhaps with the HCPs you can stay more higher level, as opposed to you don't necessarily have to be joking about psoriasis or whatever it may be.
Yeah, no, we're not doing that. And our consumer brands do a lot of content, so doctors as consumers are seeing the same content that we would as consumers on social media, so they can get the funny from the consumer side. From us, they're going to get the science.
Yeah, and that's true. The doctors are seeing very much that marketing that is going to the consumer.
Yep.
Is that helpful? Are you able to build on that, or how much does that play into what you're doing?
It is helpful, and when everything's working together, then the stories kind of build upon each other. And as a practitioner, they know what their patients are going to say or would have seen when they show up in the chair, and we give them the science part of that discussion.
Okay, and what are your KPIs with them?
Like at a macro level, the KPIs are the same as you would expect any digital. So like click-through rate, like site visits. I think on social, sometimes it's a little harder to measure. So it's just like, time on site. But our ultimate KPI is AWRs, which is those average weekly recommendations.
How are you tracking that, especially when you are going through different channels and the data is not always, you guys obviously have a full data pool, but how are you really measuring that success and able to sort of prove it out?
So, we have a third-party agency where we get the average weekly recommendations metriced from. So that's, kind of standard. When it comes to the impact of the digital tools that we're using, I think that varies. Ads, digital ads and things like that are quite easy. Social is a little harder to measure. And so we're still kind of working with vendors and test and learns in ways to really make sure that we are, and because we have our AI model, we are trying to track a doctor's engagement all the way through. And so making sure that you plug social into that bigger model is something that we're working on at a macro level.
And where are you seeing the doctor's engagement in the sense of, you usually think, in their office and whatever, but there's also that blue jean term. Where are you finding that you're reaching them more often?
Everybody's different. So the beauty of approaching doctors as people and really personalizing their experience is that some people may prefer face-to-face. Some people may prefer to just get CRM emails. Some people may prefer media. It really varies, and our goal is to give them the information that they need when they're ready to hear it. So that's going to be different for everyone.
Yeah. And you mentioned that social isn't always as easy to track or measure what's happening, but social media in general, how is it integrated with your overall media plan, and how is it working for that?
It is one of the ways that we get our message out. So as I said, we are trying to optimize how we bring that data in, but it is one of the many touch points that an HCP can have with our brands.
Well, I want to ask one more question, and then I'm going to open it up to all of you, so if you have questions, be ready for it. But just overall, what are you most excited about? Like with all that you've been doing, all the testing and how things are evolving and changing, moving forward, what are you really looking forward to?
I'm excited about the potential to have a model that does really give doctors individualized experiences, right? So if we think about, as consumers, our ability to get text from a brand, as creepy as it sometimes is. I was just searching for that, and now I'm getting ads. Oh, great, because I can't remember where I saw that, but now the ad shows up. So, what is the HCP equivalent version of that, providing the information to the doctor in the moments that they actually need it, so that they have the information on your product and feel comfortable recommending it to patients.
No, I get the benefit on what you're talking about, but I'm sorry, I talked to a guy who worked at Jersey Mike's in a dog park, never been to a Jersey Mike's in my life, never searched in my life. I'm in the car going to the airport, and I have Jersey Mike ads coming to me all the time. So that's a little creepy, just my
That's
own.
like Google, though. That's not us.
Oh, yeah. No, I know, but I'm just my 2 cents. Anyway, any questions here for Kay?
I will call on random people.
We
if
have
no
someone
one
over
raises
here.
their hand. All right, thank you. No, it's kind of on you, Emily. Thank you.
Yes, Emily Samasic. Hi. Thank you so much, Kay, for speaking with us today. I actually worked at J&J Consumer before it became Kenvue, so would love to chat with you after. So for those of us that were at the February summit, we talked a bit about patient misinformation on TikTok and social media. I wanted to know from your perspective, how is that creating friction within those patient HCP conversations, and can companies do anything in their non-personal promotion to HCPs to help further combat that?
Yes, I think that is a big problem. We hear that from doctors all the time, particularly from derms, from dermatologists. And at a macro level, some of the things that they've recommended is just that we help combat that with our own social that is fact-based. So our consumer side, if you think about Neutrogena, they proactively post myth, fact type of things to help clarify things. But then also, like, doctors still love paper, right? So providing handouts or resources in offices that they can give to patients so that they don't have to spend 15 minutes debunking a myth before they can get into seeing the actual patient for their need. So we do try to have that kind of information available and combat it in both ways, but there's more that we all can do in that space. Yeah.
Before we go to the next question, just everyone, Emily got married in this room. We're going to recreate the wedding tomorrow with Dirty Dancing. So. Okay, next question for Kay.
Hi, good morning. Mallory Wills with Branch Lab. Thank you so much for the conversation this morning. You talked about the collaboration between your teams and the consumer teams. I'm curious from either a data strategy perspective or media itself, how are you working with the consumer team to connect those blue jean moments to the work that you're doing on the HCP side?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's back to just breaking down the silos and making sure that we are connected. So, you know, our team, as I mentioned, we support, you know, multiple HCP groups, but the leads of those teams are connected to the consumer teams. So we just make sure that we're plugged in and try to remove silos as much as possible to make sure that we're driving impact.
Anyone else?
One more?
Sorry, I feel like I should stand up. I'm super short. Margarita Miranda Bodies, Sanofi. So I'm curious. I want to go back to TikTok.
Yeah.
The TikTok doctors, who you know, they dive into like all myths and the whole thing about misinformation that Emily mentioned earlier. But I'm curious. Really hard for pharma, straight pharma, to like work with like a TikTok doctor. So I'm curious how, from an OTC perspective, without giving too much, because I want to be respectful, how does Kenvue approach that, right? In terms of, because that's a whole different subset
Yeah.
of potential targets, right, to tell your story.
Yeah. So it is interesting, the transition, because we started as J&J, we were under the same pharma rules, and there's a lot of things that us as consumer wanted to do, and it was a lot of kind of back and forth. And now we are not part of J&J anymore, and so those same pharma rules don't necessarily apply. But we did, you know, work with legal and regulatory just to figure out how we could work with those derm influencers, primarily derm influencers at the time, to try and message. And at a macro level, it's focused on patient education, right? So that's really where we focus, and that's how we were able to have those conversations with legal and regulatory to get approvals to be able to work with influencers.
Kay, Lisa, thank you guys so much.